I've literally lost millions of dollars in this business, like millions. Like that's a weird thing to say to somebody. They're like, I've lost, but the resilience to come back to it, you just got to keep trying. And I remember at one point, my girlfriend was like, I was going through like a really like tough business position, and she was like, "How do you guys do this every day?" And I was like, "Well, I got two choices. Like, I can either like fold it up and like sell my house and go like live in the middle of nowhere, or I can just kind of keep putting one foot in front of the other and say like, okay, how do I swim out of this mess and like how do we make it better?"
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works, How to Decide, Believe, and Begin to Live Your Best Life. Today's guest has become very skilled at swimming out of business messes. So much so that a side hustle she started selling used books on eBay morphed into a $5 million Amazon business known as Loan Cone, which she recently sold. However, her involvement with Amazon continues through her agency, Ridgeline Insights. This month, she discovered that while there are 2.7 million sellers on Amazon, she's in the top 2,000, meaning her company is in the top 0.0005% of Amazon sellers. If anybody understands selling on Amazon, it's my guest, Annalisa DiMarta. In our interview, Annalisa reveals what it really takes to be a successful seller on Amazon. She shares the sweet spot of how long you should give your product listing a chance, what are the most important aspects you need to pay attention to, and more. There were a lot of options for me to choose which takeaways I'd feature at the end of this episode. Seriously, it was a difficult choice because while she speaks about selling on Amazon, the philosophy behind her advice applies to the majority of side hustle businesses. But I settled on these three things: why and when to jump into a new venture, even if there's the possibility of failure, how to improve your cash flow situation, and how to reframe the feeling of depriving yourself when you're making those smarter cash flow choices. Now, here is my conversation with a top-ranking Amazon seller and side hustle hero, Annalisa DiMarta. Well, hey, Annalisa, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Joan. I appreciate it.
Your side hustle story started in college, selling used books to make extra money. Was that eBay, Amazon?
eBay. And this was back when Amazon was just known as a book retailer. So it's like, 2005, going to estate sales, library sales, buying a book for $1. And there was something that was kind of like intoxicating about it, that it was, you'd buy a book for $1 and this is pre-iPhones too. So we all had like smart flip phones.
Yes.
So it's like rush home with a bag of books and, look up the titles. You learn publishing really quickly, first editions, all that stuff. And then I remember like taking pictures with like a point and shoot camera. Like there wasn't
I
the
remember
software we have
those.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's like everything is so much more simple. The hours I've wasted, but yeah, and that was it. And that was kind of this like sell a book for $1, or buy a book for $1, sell it for $5, $10, $15, $25. That was like, wow, this is
Nice.
great.
Yeah, what a great education on markups. But where did you get that idea to do that in the first place?
We had a good friend of ours, my husband and I, at the time we were dating, him and his wife owned a bookstore. And he was like, and he would take us around once in a while to like because book selling wasn't like, the internet really wasn't a thing for a lot of these guys. And he would go to like these obscure little towns to like buy and trade books. And it became this like neat little world. And he's like, you guys really should try this. And I remember just being like, gosh, like this is so silly because it was so simple. And then, just kind of wow, okay, this works.
Right. Oh, it's wonderful to have that person come along in your life and say, hey, how about this?
Totally. No, I give him a Sam. I give Sam a lot of credit.
And then at some point, in addition to books, you expanded to other products?
Yeah. So the challenge, right? So it's fun going to like yard sales, estate sales, Goodwill, and that's like, a nice treasure hunting, but it's not reliable, consistent, scalable. Okay. And at the time, Amazon was also building out its position as a marketplace. And it was also starting to do fulfilled by Amazon, which is where, you would send items into Amazon and they will fulfill for you, which now is how we buy everything. But at the time, we literally had like bookshelves set up in their basement, alphabetical order, and like we would manually ship people. I was in labor with one of my kids.
Oh my!
Going to the post office because I was like, I don't know how long we're gonna be in the hospital for, so like we better ship these books now. So silly. Yeah. So then it just became, this is not a scalable model. there's some remainder books in there we can buy closeout lots from like Barnes and Noble and different publishing groups, but that was much slimmer margins. And so it just became stuff. And so now they call it online arbitrage, but it was looking around for opportunities. And so it'd be closeout lots. Like it would be like us versus Sierra Trading Post to go after like, 15 pallets of Nalgene water bottles. Or like I remember one time a tractor trailer showed up with 5 pallets of faucets, like Price Pfister faucets from Home Depot.
Yes.
It was like just their returns, liquidations, whatever. Yeah. And that was like, okay, this is working. And then finally, there's a light bulb moment. We're doing this for a couple of years. And then I just, to put it in context of what the environment looked like, I'd finished my MBA in 2009. And this was right after, the 2008, 2009 recession was like kind of in full swing.
Yeah.
So having an MBA at that point was like pretty worthless. The jobs weren't there. And my husband was a college professor. So he still had his day job. And I'm sitting around going, man, I could go to work, but I'm going to make like $12 or $15 an hour. And this is kind of silly. Let's just do this. And the side hustle kind of just grew. And from there, we were able to just like start taking ourselves a lot more seriously and say, okay, there's nothing in front of me. I have health insurance through my husband's job. Rather than buy liquidation lots from like different companies, what if I just called companies directly and said, do you mind if I sell your products on Amazon? And I think people were just like, I don't understand Amazon. Sure. As long as you're going to buy something from us, great. And that just became this hodgepodge of stuff and just going after retail accounts and kind of learning through that process of what am I learning from this product A versus B in terms of profitability, in terms of advertising, in terms of positioning, and kind of really building a skill set from there. But it all started with learning how to sell books, like putting a book up on eBay and just looking at the title and saying, okay, this book looks really cool. What are the pieces that I can sell about this book, as opposed to just like saying, here's a book. Like really learning how to make it appealing.
Learning that important copywriting piece.
Copy, images are everything. Yeah. And I don't have a Photoshop background. I wish I did. But again, me with my point and shoot camera. But yeah, that was a lot of lessons learned through just side hustling it.
Yeah.
You're trying to turn that inventory as fast as you can. And there's definitely a bunch of just dogs in there, but at least the good was outweighing the bad. Really trying to mine cash flow was a huge component, a big lesson learned in the early days. I mean, we would do 0% credit cards. We would, try to get terms from vendors and say, okay, like net 60, net 90.
Right.
Yeah. Like there was a lot of crazy, kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And somehow it worked out until we got to a bank and was like, hey, could we get a line of credit? And they're like, sure.
And at that point you were both working, we had full-time jobs. This was a side hustle.
So we started selling books casually from 2005 to about 2009, 10. And then at that point, we decided to move and take ourselves seriously in about 2010, 11.
Oh, wow.
And then at that point, we were just operating out of our garage together, like my husband and I working together. And then about 2014, we took it very seriously. And we're like, okay, we need to start hiring employees. Like we're at a point now, this is, it's kind of like the first employee is like, what can they do? And how do we think about this? And also wanted to make sure there was a sufficient amount of work for that person to do. So in 2014, 2015, we brought on our first few employees. And that was like, okay, now there's a real business. It sounds crazy that there wasn't a real business before, because there certainly was. But yeah, now we're up to about 25 full-time employees in Idaho. And that's like a different ballgame. But yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so what point did one of you or both of you actually quit your full-time jobs?
So I remember we were sitting around for Christmas. I think I just had, or was pregnant with my first child. And so it was around 2009, 2010. And it was something that my husband was teaching at the University of Rochester. He loved his job, but ultimately he's looking down the path and he's like, man, I just don't think I can be an academic forever. He did it for 10 years and his job had a lot of travel. And it was just a kind of a burden. I was doing some part-time payroll and we're just looking at this. And it was like, we had just closed out our Q4 and our business had generated $100,000. And we're looking at what his salary was and my salary. And we're like, if this is doing 100, I mean, there's overhead, right? There's expenses, but
of course. Yeah.
Okay. So imagine if instead of, giving 40, 50 hours a week to the university, what could we do with this? And it was also this baby was coming. And I was like, I like the idea of having some personal freedoms. And that was kind of this tipping point that we're like, okay, and we're young. We're 29, 30, 35, somewhere, depending on our ages. It was like, worst case scenario, we fail. Like we are young enough to start over. But like, if we don't try this, I think we'll be more upset by not taking that next step. So yeah, I was just kind of like, wow, $100,000. That was like, holy cow. Like this little book business turned into something that made $100,000. Yeah.
Yeah, that was mind blowing, because when you think back to, your first week or two or month where you were just selling a couple of books here and there to what it grew into, even at that point,
well,
would have
the
been
whole
amazing.
point of the whole point of our first, the selling books was like, my husband had just bought a pickup truck and, they're expensive. And I think the goal was to pay like a $500 a month car payment. And so it was like, if I could pay this car payment, that's great. And that was and for years we kind of treated it like that. And it paid many bills, but it was finally that like tipping point of like, okay, there's something here that we should be going after.
And I love that thinking behind, let's give this a shot, give it our best shot. If it works out, fantastic. If it doesn't, at least we're not going to be playing that what if game, that regret in the future. Yeah. Especially at the ages that you described. I mean, that's the time to do it, to go for it.
Yeah, no, we were pretty diligent too in our personal financial lives, which I think it really helped us set up this business for success, was that we had done like monthly financial planning together. We had just whatever people like about Dave Ramsey, the debt snowball was an incredible tool for us to just start paying down student loan debt and really prioritize spending. And so having this business and being fiscally conservative was really, I think, a really good thing. So then looking at this business, taking this risk, it felt a little more calculated. Like we can see how this will work out. Yeah, but still scary. It's always scary to take that.
Absolutely.
Like yeah, there's no safety net, right?
And then when most people go shopping for their kids, it's just a shopping trip. But for you, one of those trips in 2016, I think it was, marked a real pivotal moment for you. Maybe tell us about that.
So our business has been humming along at this point. Maybe I've got 5 or 6 employees. I've got 3 kids at this point. They're all 3 and under, which was chaos. And I go out to get one of my kiddos a pair of rain boots and go to REI. And I was just like, man, these are all like black and navy blue and just so like utilitarian, well made, but just like ugly. And adjacent to REI is Target. So I was like, well, let's go in there. And the selections for rain boots were just like flimsy, full of like garish characters. And I was like, man, but a light bulb went off. Something that in the agency that we didn't really get an opportunity to have was a controlled environment. So you sell all these products, but you're in this multivariate environment. So I couldn't tell if I made my page look like this, or if I advertised like this, or there was just a lot of unknowns because there's other sellers and different types of competition, and they weren't my own products. So I also couldn't confidently tell one of the clients like, hey, I want to try this. It's going to be a gamble. We may or may not. And it's going to cost you.
You couldn't really isolate what was working and what was creating the sales.
Not well. I mean, definitely assumptions, you see things over time, but we were really looking for kind of a test case that we could go to clients confidently and say, here's what we're going to do. And here's what we think the outcome will be, with a lot more certainty. And so it was just like, all of a sudden it was like, poof, I'm looking at this and I was like, rain boots, this is it. Like there's nothing on the market. And I'm looking at my kids and I'm like, why isn't there just like a very basic, simple little dinosaur pattern? Why isn't there a cute little fairy pattern? Just something that like is matchable, durable. Kids are going to love it and parents will love it. And I will say, just having sold clothing and apparel for a long time, footwear is pretty intimidating because it's all the different sizes, all the different colors. Yeah. But it was the one area that I was like, I know this. I've bought a ton of clothing for clients. So I felt pretty capable. And then, naively, I mean, I look back now, things that could have gone wrong didn't, thankfully. But most times it takes a long time to get a product to market. It took me about 4 months to find a manufacturer, work with a couple of friends who are illustrators in town. They gave me some beautiful patterns, wired some money to the middle of nowhere in Hangzhou, China. It was like, fingers crossed. I mean, didn't even look at a sample in person, like all the things that like could have gone wrong, because this wasn't a brand. This was just like, hey, let me try this. And I bought what I thought would have been at least 6 months of inventory, sold out in 2 weeks. So I launched it August 1st, and by August 12th, I was sold out. So I remember standing at a trade show just being like, I can't believe people are just buying these. Yeah. So I was like, oh, that was fun. Okay, cool. We learned some things. That's great. And my husband stopped me. He was like, why don't you pursue this? I was like, no, I was like, I'm not a manufacturer. Like that was a little fun project, but like, this is not my world. I'm too busy over here doing our stuff for the agency. And he was like, someone should. If anyone should, you did it. You should keep going. And I'm glad he said that. So I ended up turning that into a $5 million brand over a few years. And I just recently exited from that. So that's been also pretty cool to like have had that experience of gone through a sale of a business. That was pretty eye-opening, and I've learned a lot to now apply to future projects. But yeah, so that was a really good run. So yeah.
What a beautiful story of an entrepreneur seeing a need and filling it.
Reluctant though. I mean,
the reluctant, that'll be the name of your book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur.
I mean, I really didn't see it. And I give my husband a lot of credit for, he does a great job of just helping, harness my energy. And so we do work together, but it's nice that we've, separate areas, and that it was really nice having Lone Cone I built out a team. I like, it was all my baby, and it was just a cool opportunity, especially working with overseas vendors. The time, because they are about 15 hours ahead of us.
Okay.
And so it was just nice having, like, with little kids, I could stay up late or I could get up early, and I was able to still be with my children during the day and still run the company. Yeah.
But selling products for someone else is quite different than creating it yourself.
Yeah.
Because of all the things that you mentioned.
Yep.
How did that happen? Were there connections that you had from people that kind of pointed you in the right direction, or how do you find a supplier or like a manufacturer in China?
Well, now, I mean, this is also going back. Alibaba was not what it is today. So I would, if someone was to start today, I would say, check out Alibaba, check out, a couple places.
Right. I
am a little bit of an internet stalker. So like, if you want to find your ex-boyfriend from like 25 years ago, I got that. But what I was doing, it's free. You can go online and look up import records. And so I went to a couple of competitors and I was like, where do you make your products? I looked at their import records. And yeah, I think many brands now are smart where you can, we did this with Lone Cone, you can mask where your stuff is coming from, so that you're not fully on the web. But that was it. I was like, okay, well, if it worked for this brand, it's going to work for me. And I think it was like the first email I sent out, like the person replied and was like, sure. I mean, I've made many products since that did not have that win rate. Yeah.
And like you said, you were really fortunate that first email that was sent out didn't go to like a scammer.
Oh, it could have. I mean, I didn't look at the products. I was like, these seem nice. Like all the things that like I think could have gone wrong. But then I was like, okay, now that I'm taking this seriously, we put a lot more processes in place, and it became much more like, it's not a one-off project. This is like a real business. But yeah, how to do it. So yeah, you can totally go. There's a services called Panjiva or Import Genius. They're really nice programs that makes the search. They do cost money. The search is free. You can do it yourself.
So how long did it take you to build up Lone Cone to that $5 million a year level?
About 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I really think, and that the lesson I've learned from this is that it's patience. Every year we kind of doubled our numbers, which was really interesting to see. So it's a waiting game. And I think I learned a lot in there about margin, that just because you're making the revenue doesn't mean you're making the money. Like we had one, rain boots, the big time is springtime. We had one disastrous Q4, so holiday, and then a ton of extra inventory. So we're like, okay, cool. We'll try to blow this out during, hopefully there's a wet spring. And it was the most unprofitable Q1 we'd ever had. I think we sold about $1 million worth of product and made about $15,000 all said and done, which is, I mean, criminal. Yeah. So but lessons learned of just like how to manage inventory well, especially in a size, color variation, learning more about freight. Amazon does charge a lot of fees, especially during holiday. So really saying like, how do we prioritize certain SKUs without giving Amazon all of our profits? Yeah, there's quite a bit to that. So probably could have made some smarter decisions and made more money earlier, but it was an invaluable lessons. I mean, sometimes the best lessons you learn are the ones you learn just through mistakes, right?
Absolutely. Especially as your numbers continue to increase, those same mistakes will be that much more costly, but you've learned the lesson. Yeah. To be that much wiser going into the future.
I have failed. I'm working on a book, which it's kind of like, it became like a cathartic thing. And I've literally lost millions of dollars in this business, like millions. Like that's a
Mm-hmm.
weird thing to say to somebody. They're like, I've lost, but the resilience to come back to it, you just got to keep trying. And I remember at one point my girlfriend was like, I was going through like a really like tough business position. And she was like, how do you guys do this every day? And I was like, well, I got two choices. I can either like fold it up and like sell my house and go like live in the middle of nowhere, or I can just kind of keep putting one foot in front of the other and say like, okay, how do I swim out of this mess? And like, how do we make it better? We call it type 2 fun. Like when you get lost in the woods and you're like scared, you're running out of water and it's getting dark, and then you find your car and you're like, oh, that actually was really fun.
Yes, yes.
I had a lot of type 2 fun in our business.
Oh, that's great. We see the numbers and the $5 million business, but to get to that point, here's the reality. So what made you decide you wanted to sell Lone Cone?
I wasn't on my list. We got approached about a year before we sold it by an Amazon aggregator. And the aggregator space was really fascinating. And it just was kind of like, Lone Cone was my baby. And I had a really great team of, well, men and women, but mostly girls that worked with me. And I loved what I did. And I had this number in my head. And I was like, okay, if I launch a few more products, I'll wait a few years, but it's good for me. We always like talking to investors, anybody wants to acquire your business. Like those are great conversations because they're telling you exactly what you should be doing. Anytime I go to we have a great bank now, but we still take calls from banks, and because they're looking at certain metrics, and those are great to see, to kind of read the room and say like, here's how I should be running my business, or here's how I should be positioning myself. And so we took this call just out of like an exploratory call. And I really liked the owner of the aggregator, or I guess he's a CEO, not the owner. Had a great connection, and their plan is to take Lone Cone and make it a household name. They've hired a bunch of really talented folks who I am confident that they will get distribution into bigger places. Like, I don't know what their exact plan is, but like Target and Nordstrom's, and those are things that was never up my alley. So it was a really good fit. And then in terms of time, it was just like, okay, I'm looking ahead. Didn't foresee this pandemic coming, didn't foresee the supply chain mess from the post-pandemic.
Sure.
So in some ways, for me, selfishly, it was a really good time to exit. They unfortunately got the little bit of the back end blip, which I don't think my company would have been able to swim through that as successfully as they did. So it just became a really good thing for timing, and it gives us some financial freedom. Having a business it's hard. I think people don't realize how much you have to have invested, and there's a lot of ups and downs. And even though we solely own the company, I own all the risk. And so having the exit was nice to allow us to be truly self-funded, that I don't need to rely on the bank, that these are all of my investments. And yeah, so it came at a really good time where I wasn't expecting it. It was just, okay, let me think through this. And it was just like, this might be the right time. Like there's a certain ceiling of knowledge that I had. And I think that their team just brings in a lot more expertise that I couldn't. So it was a great time to pass the baby off.
Sure, because then you could see it grow. They can take it to the next level.
100%. Yeah. And also just internally, we were running this company with 25 people, and I had this team of 5 or so that was helping grow Lone Cone. And at some point, they become kind of mutually exclusive resources internally. We're fighting for, okay, we have 3 full-time graphic designers. Well, Lone Cone needs this, but this client needs this, and how to start prioritizing that. And it was becoming a bigger need and a bigger suck of resources. And so it was just really nice to say, oh, okay, we had this agency that's successful. Let's just absorb everybody inward and kind of just concentrate on one thing, as opposed to this 2 different businesses in a business.
Right, because what started out selling books as a side hustle, eventually you started selling other people's products. So Lone Cone was kind of like a side hustle to it.
Yes.
So you've sold that now. So you're working in the agency. That's your main baby now.
That is, yes.
So what kind of work do you do there? What's happening in that company?
So we do Amazon channel management for a variety of mostly outdoor and lifestyle brands. We've got a couple of outliers to that, but mostly sports related. So camping, hiking, biking, fishing, and that tends to be our sweet spot. So what we do with the clients is we'll manage everything for them from terms of like inventory, demand planning, supply chain, obviously what you see on Amazon. So the content, advertising, which is critical to being successful on Amazon. So their ad strategy. And then reverse logistics, so customer service and returns. So it's soup to nuts.
Okay.
It's definitely, we do best with partnerships where partners are engaged. Really like having the collaborative, communicative relationships that it's for us. It's like we're happy to take it on as hands off as clients want to be, but I find that things are much more successful when the client's involved and we understand what's going on with their business globally. If they're like launching something new in REI, it's like, well, then we should be putting that as well on, the Amazon storefront and like marketing it there because there's a lot of cross pollination.
Sure.
So yeah, but me personally, I spend my time doing more business development, marketing. Yeah.
Great. So your company, and that's Ridgeline Insights?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's stepped away from actually buying and keeping the inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good switch a couple of years ago. It became kind of apparent talking to brands that, you're as a retailer, you're part of this pot of sellers and you're kind of reading the tea leaves and you're like, at some point the brands, they don't need this and they actually will have a better outcome as a brand if they can control the experience. So it's consistently, items consistently packaged, the page looks good. It's the same effort you put on your homepage, your web page, it's the same effort you should be putting on your Amazon page, especially if you're selling products.
Sure.
So I think it was really important to see brands controlling that, but not a lot of folks in these companies have it. I mean, it takes a team. One of our team, it's like 6 people to manage one account. So hiring the Amazon guy, is not hiring that guy does not know how to plan inventory, how to create content, how to run an ad strategy. So for the same price as an employee, many brands choose to work with an agency.
Yeah, because there are so many facets of it that you just described. So I really want to tap into your expertise selling in the Amazon space for our listeners who are currently part of the Amazon ecosystem, but also for those who are just thinking about jumping in. Like, for example, there are a number of different ways to sell on Amazon. Maybe touch on those and in your opinion, what's the best approach?
Sure. Yeah. The most common way I think just everyone starts off is doing that arbitrage, right? So maybe you're looking at your old books on your bookshelf and you have an old textbook, or you go to the Goodwill and you can find something there. Things tend to do better when they're new. So maybe at the grocery store, you see like a cart of like closeout, Halloween stuff. Is there a way that you could sell that on Amazon and make a profit?
Okay.
That's online arbitrage. That's or arbitrage in general. And I think that model does really, really well. But again, my problem with that is that it's not scalable, consistent. You're very much eating what you're killing, and you will stay a side hustle. And that's fine if you're just looking for pocket money, but it's a really good way to learn Amazon. It's generally a low overhead. Like you could go to the grocery store, spend $50 and probably make 175 net. And yeah, you're doing pretty well, right?
Right. It's a great way to pay for your education.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, there's very little to lose. So yeah, I encourage everyone who's curious about Amazon. That's probably the easiest way. And then I feel like the next kind of move up from that is either private labeling or white labeling, black labeling. There's multiple different definitions, but it's essentially like when you go to the grocery store, right? The same can of green beans that's made by Del Monte is also making whatever Albertsons, whatever a grocery store is.
Right.
So similarly, you can get some products with your own logo on it. That's nice because it's your product, right? But you have a lot of marketing and branding to do. So there's a lot of work for someone to look at it and say, why would I buy your water bottle when I can buy Hydro Flasks? So what's your value? What's your value proposition? But it works. There's a ton of searches. So there's people who build these great businesses on private label. And then there's a contract manufacturing, which is, I have this idea for a total unique product and it's my product. And I'm going to, work with an engineer, create some CADs or however your product is designed. And then I'm going to sell that. And I think there's more complications at both the private label and the contract manufacturing. There's a lot more overhead, a lot more of a long-term investment. Typically, like just thinking about manufacturing and the cost to manufacture, often factories have minimums, right? They have to set up the line. They have to, they have to set up the line. So there's a switching cost. And in doing that, so they may want 1,000 pieces, they may want 5,000 pieces, and you have to be a good forecaster to say, how much can I reasonably sell and how comfortable am I going to be if this inventory doesn't sell? But you're looking at, if you're spending $5 a widget and it's a 5,000 piece minimum, it's a $25,000 investment right off the bat, plus customs, plus, transportation costs, plus warehousing. So
Yes.
there's a little bit of an upfront investment, but if you can flip that inventory in a reasonable amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
you get that money back. And then with the contract manufacturing, there's a lot of engineering costs, a lot of product design costs. That product's not proven out. So maybe you want to make this super unique water bottle. Well, if your first iteration leaks, that's not going
Mm,
to back to the drawing board. Like what happened?
right.
And you still have the same, minimums. So those are, I think, probably the three most common ways to enter Amazon.
Okay.
But typically, I think it's just, that old school arbitrage is the easiest, fastest way to learn.
What incorrect assumptions do people often make when they start trying to sell on Amazon?
I think, I mean, I know we're talking about side hustles. I think a lot of people, I think it goes into two extremes.
Okay.
I think folks thinks it's incredibly easy. It's mailbox money, just like list it and you're good.
Mm-hmm.
I also see a lot of, and I will say they're predatory courses. So you can buy my course for $500. I'll teach you how to sell, and then you get an hour with me. I think that's doing an unfair service to a lot of folks who just, I think at some point it's just trying. And so I think with that, it's a matter of, if you're Amazon curious, I would encourage anyone to just, you don't have to pay for a selling account. There's some benefits to a paid account, but it's like 30 or $40 a month. But if you're just starting out, they'll take a little bit more from you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a free way of just saying, how does this work? What is it like? And Amazon has come so far with automations and user experience that now listing a product and managing it is so easy. And that's dangerous, right? So it becomes a little bit like addictive. You're like, I'm making some money, I'm doing some things, and there is kind of a high to it in some ways. But then it's when you start to scale, that's where I think people often really undervalue how hard Amazon becomes. Uh,
Mm.
you see a lot of people who recommend just getting a VA from overseas. You can do it really cheap. Usually the Philippines or Pakistan, there's a lot of Amazon support folks internationally based, and they're fairly inexpensive. I see a lot of people who think, yeah, I'm just going to get a VA. They're going to know what to do. But like anything else, it's you get what you give. And it's when you're asking people, trying to, get information or get them to perform in a certain way, I think it becomes really hard to manage. It becomes hard to manage talent, especially overseas talent. I mean, there's people who are
Yes.
wildly successful at it. But yeah, it's a little bit of a lot of work. So
Yeah.
I think as you start to get bigger, it's then the investments in systems, the investments in people. And I think to do Amazon well, you have to make those investments. And so I think that's it. The common misconception is that it's like, oh, 4-hour work week, no problem. Like I do get this a lot. Like, oh, you guys sell online, right? So like you don't have an office, and like no, the opposite. I have an office full of people. I'm committed. I have probably less free time now than I used to, but it's worth it. Like I have I love what I do, so it doesn't feel like laborious.
Well, I understand you've bought an office building in Boise, Idaho to run your
Yes.
operations. Is that
Yeah.
something that was part of your plan from the beginning?
No. No.
No. No.
My husband jokes that I'm like a yard sale haggler. Like I can't pay full price for anything. And I was just walking past a building one day, and I was like, I wonder how much they want for this. It was a little rundown. It's like a 1960s old school office building, but it's right, like Boise's booming, and it's right next to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
It's a great spot. And
Great.
I was like, well, let me just, so they wanted a number, and I made him a very low number. He came up like 10,000 above my low number, and he took it. And my husband's like,
Wow.
you're going to do this? And I was like, so we'd spent 2 years remodeling it. Yeah. So it's nice having a little piece of real estate that we can, kind of say this is our building, which we've rented for a long time. So it's nice having it. And our building's cool. And yeah, it's definitely a nice retirement piece. I'll say that much.
Yes, that's a very smart. I'm a huge believer in diversification of assets.
Yes.
Just like multiple sources of income, so that if something goes sideways in one piece, that's not catastrophic. It's just one piece.
Exactly. And that's, when you're starting out though, you have no money. Like looking back, if I could have bought the building we were first in, I just didn't have cash.
Right.
And so it just all came at a really good time. We're like a couple good years, really trying to save all of our pennies. And so this building came up, and it was at a really low price. I was like, how could I say no? And then being a responsible business owner, the bank was like, sure, no problem. Like this was not so I guess it's just nice having a good financial track record, because this is,
For sure.
have to make some investments. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be able to jump at those opportunities and good hats off to you for, walking by that place, and rather than continuing to walk, something that, your intuition said, you know what, I got to check this out, and then
Yeah.
actually following through on it.
I know, it makes my husband crazy. He's like, I can't believe you. He was embarrassed at the offer, and I was like, let's just try. No, they say no. I guess before I did all this, I did outside sales, and I did a lot of cold calling. And there's something to, I think, that and waitressing are like the two areas where like you just feel rejection and like society staring at you. And I think I've just kind of lost some of that insecurity. I'm like, oh, well, they say no, and I move on.
That's right. Nothing lost.
Yeah.
Oh, if everyone understood that, though.
Oh, I mean, it's hard. I'm watching this now with my three kids, and my oldest is 11 going on 12, and her having to make a phone call or having to navigate society in any way. It's painful because she's afraid. And I'm like, well, let's talk through the fear. What are they going to do? And
yeah,
easier said than done.
But good for you for coaching her on that.
Thank you.
I'd love it if you could give us the scoop on selling on Amazon. Like, what does it really take to be successful selling on the platform?
This is something that working with clients, we see a lot. And it's with our clients, they often come to us and they'll say, our biggest competitor in the US is, this brand or that brand. And then when we first engage with them, we're like, hey, have you seen these other brands on Amazon? They're like, oh, we don't consider them a real competitor. And I'm like, well, I can show you their volume. They're an absolute fraud. And I think the biggest thing I see amongst clients, which I think carries into everybody else, is really understanding the Amazon marketplace and why would a customer buy from you? And it seems like such a big question, but it really, at the end of the day, it's when you're walking through Amazon and you typed in your keywords, maybe typed in like, outdoor light bulb or school backpack, right? You're looking at the first page that comes up. Why is someone going to click into your product? And I think like for factories, like Factory Direct, you get that on pricing. So your customer's going to click in because you're the least expensive option and it's serviceable and it's fine, right? And then there's obviously these major brands on there.
Yeah.
So like, GE's going to sell you a light bulb, or JanSport's going to sell you a backpack. So they're already going to win there on brand equity. So it's all of this in between. Why would a customer click into you? And I think if you can start to understand your product, your target customer, you will be successful. So look at the images that you're putting out there. If you're selling a product for kids, which is what I'm used to with Lone Cone, does it look kid friendly? Like, it sounds basic, but like sometimes you look at photos and you're like, what was that brand thinking? Like, you are a camping brand. Why are you showing me pictures of a tent assembled on a piece of pavement? Like, it sounds really simple, but like step one, I want to see your tent with a wooded scene, right?
When you started describing that, what flashed in my mind was the Lone Cone website. I mean, it reflects the product beautifully.
Thank you.
It's gorgeous.
Websites are a labor of love. We've done a lot of work on websites for years. Yeah. So I think to be successful is really knowing your customer and really thinking that in Amazon and your Amazon listing, it's a fluid, it's a rough draft, it's a constant work in progress. The second you have a moment of success, you have a target on your back. And I've just found that it's imperative to take your top sellers at least once a quarter and just look around. Who else has entered the market? Are they comping you? Again, if you have legal protections, maybe there's a way you can have that listing shut down. But I think it's the devil's in the details with Amazon. And I think the difference between being an okay seller and a successful seller is really making sure you're talking to your customer, making sure you're putting that product in the right light. And you're thinking through like, what would a customer want to see? What are the things that are really important? Obviously, you don't want to sell junk either, but if you start with a good product, I think everything else is going to come down to branding, marketing, and positioning.
And so if I wanted to jump into that space, how long should I give myself to
be able to sell? So my general rule of thumb I've learned is 3 years, and it seems like an incredibly long amount of time. Like some of our clients we've worked with in the past were fast fashion. So like, every season this is the new spring collection, this is the fall collection. And it was painful because you're constantly launching, you're constantly trying to get reviews and become just sort of survive in those you're constantly trying to survive in just this very hyper competitive environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I found working both with clients and with Lone Cone, any SKU I launched, it was like the 3-year mark was finally, gosh, it does seem long, but it was finally where you've gone through a couple of holidays, you've gone through maybe some supply chain issues, you've had, late products arriving late, products arriving early. You've gone through enough stuff that, and you probably at 3 years from now, you should have a couple thousand reviews. So what's working well with your product. But definitely there's some times where I've launched a couple of products in the last year. I'm literally sitting at like the 18-month, 2-year mark, and I'm questioning like, as like profitability margins getting tanked, is this something that I should keep going? And I'm like, no, I'm going to stick this out. Like 3 years tends to be the sweet spot of, is this working? And typically if you've lasted 3 years, it does work.
Valuable point. Thanks for that. So bottom line is give it some time. Don't give up too early.
That's kind of life, right? Like the more
right,
you or something. Yeah. And also like there's a lot of competitors who managing inventory is a challenge, and cash flow, and or maybe they run into an issue with Amazon and their account gets shut down because they're doing something they shouldn't be. Competitors come, competitors go. And even amongst the bigger brands, we would have major brands come on and all of a sudden their listings weren't there. So that's where I think 3 years is just this really solid amount of time to just kind of go through enough experiences and feel confident in going to year 4.
Great. So what's next for Ridgeline Insights?
Yeah, lots of stuff. So we've had, tremendous success. I give a lot of credit to, the pandemic pushing e-commerce. So we've had a ton of great clients come in and take our services on. And we've done a great job with retention. Ken and I, my husband, Ken and I feel really, we treat our people like people. And I think as a result, like the Great Resignation, I'm not saying that, life is perfect. Like every employer, we like in every family, we have our, our issues, but I have an amazing team and we've just hired a couple new folks to add in some fresh talent. So I'm really trying to grow the agency. I think we've had a ton of success with word of mouth. And I think now is the time for us to really do some true marketing, get our name out there. We work with big clients. We've got such great, good case studies and wins. And it's just, we've done a terrible job of externally communicating it. So I would all the energy I put into LoanCom was a lot of fun. And now it's been fun for me to kind of switch on instead of going, B2C, I'm now doing B2B. And I've really enjoyed kind of this world for myself. And so I'd like to see where marketing agency goes and, continue to add clients.
So you want to stop being the best kept secret?
Self-promotion is the hardest thing. And there's so many people who are great at it. And you watch how I've got a girlfriend of mine who does her own PR. And I'm always in awe. She sends out this great Monday morning email and the stuff she puts on LinkedIn. And I'm like, no, I'm like, we're too busy, heads down. And shame on us. So I aspire to be better at putting myself out there more. Yeah.
Awesome. I look forward to Side Hustle Hero helping in that, getting word out for you. So there you go.
Yes.
What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn, mostly LinkedIn for business. So you can look me up, Annalisa DiMarta. And I'm also on TikTok. I've found that's been my favorite place to go, not only for entertainment, but I love the information. So you'll find me in both spots. And either way, I'd love to connect with you.
Great. And I'll sure to have those links in the show notes.
Thank you.
As someone who knows about launching a side hustle and what it takes to scale it, what's your best tip, hack for overcoming fear and self-doubt to propel one to actually take action?
Yes. Be realistic. So if you're wondering why you are afraid of taking that next step, if you're going from a music teacher to a rocket scientist, that's going to be a couple of hurdles, right? But I think most of the time that we just get in our own heads, I think it's this fear of failure. So my advice is my comment to this is you are going to fail. I've failed.
So get over it. It's going to happen.
You are. That's right? It. Yeah. It's micro failures. And it's about the law of averages. We had this infinite wall of worry and you got to just start climbing over it. And someone told me this years ago and it stuck with me, and it's the way we run our business now, is spend a little, learn a lot, or risk a little, learn a lot. And so if you're thinking about making the step into selling on Amazon, it's how can you do this in a calculated way that you feel comfortable with? And maybe a little for you is $50, maybe a little is $10,000. But whatever you're doing, I think it's so important to do that hindsighting, reflect, like, what did you learn? You're gonna fail. Like, you're gonna screw up somewhere. You're gonna owe someone some money. You're gonna like have something shut down. Like, you are gonna have some scary things that will occur, or maybe things aren't selling. It's those little micro failures that really allow us to be successful. So I encourage everyone to take the step. Risk tolerance is just a subjective way of thinking. I think, yeah, just be realistic, but spend a little, learn a lot.
Thank you so very much, Annalisa, for your insider's perspective on selling on Amazon, for sharing your story. So very inspirational, and for being today's side hustle hero.
Joan, thank you so much for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, I side hustle to multi-millionaire. Shoot, if I can do it, I know anyone listening probably can do it.
Fantastic. Thanks again. You heard Annalisa talk about how a review of the bookkeeping at one point of their side hustle revealed that they brought in gross earnings of $100,000. That was a wake-up call that prompted her and her husband to jump into the business full-time. But she also said that there was certainly no guarantee of her company's success. But she didn't want to be in the position in the future of being upset by not taking the chance, by regretting not going for it. We all know there are no guarantees in life. But if you've got a passion for something, an idea you want to pursue, go for it, especially if you're young. Now is the time to experiment and learn. I love it when she said her motto is risk a little, learn a lot. That should be everyone's motto, regardless of age. When I was 26 years old, I faced a career trajectory in the banking business. In fact, I turned down a promotion and instead moved to the other side of the country on a whim and a prayer. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I wanted something different than a life in banking. Part of my reasoning was that I honestly would prefer to try something and have it not work out than to not try and in the future play that what if game. What would have happened if I had moved across the country and embarked on the life of an entrepreneur? Instead of playing that game, I threw the cards on the table, walked out, and headed west to find out. While I do subscribe to the opinion that the objective should be to raise our income to exceed our expenses, rather than just looking at cutting back expenses, that's a second tier. The first tier is to work at creating a situation where our base expenses are more than covered by the amount of money that's coming in every month. Ideally, that's through passive income, but at the moment, it may be through your full-time or part-time employment. The foundation piece of our financial freedom is to first start looking at cash outflows. If more money is going out each month than coming in, take a close look at where you're spending. Obviously, food, accommodation, transportation, or essentials, but where can you cut back? How many streaming services every month do you need? Do you really need to be paying for food delivery? Can you walk, bike, or transit rather than take an Uber or drive your car? Wouldn't you rather put some of that money towards your side hustle that can potentially bring your financial freedom sooner? And to make those choices easier to make, here's the last takeaway. When you make a conscious choice of, instead of having 4 streaming services, I'm going to cut back to 1, don't think of it as a loss of 3, but rather as a smart choice you're making because you're freeing up cash to apply to your side hustle so that you've got the potential to become financially free that much quicker. And then later on, your income can handle as many streaming services as you want. Annalisa talked about the advantages of being fiscally responsible and counting pennies in the early days so that she built up a good credit rating and was able to leverage that goodwill with her banker to take advantage of and jump on opportunities. Now, you may purchase the winning lottery ticket, buy the right stock, or hodl the right cryptocurrency. All those things involve forces beyond your control. But what is in your control is to follow the advice I've outlined as part of your strategy to become financially free and have more fun with your side hustle. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find the links we've mentioned and the show notes on our website, sidehustleheropodcast.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the show, on the guests, how this podcast is helping you. What areas could we do better? Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @JoanPosivy. Thanks for listening and hustle on.